This lesson we're going to be covering 3 different ways that you can create JavaScript arrays. An array is an ordered list of values that's referred to by names within the index. So going into our JavaScript code, so we're linking an HTML file to app2.js, which is our JavaScript file. The output is being rendered within the browser on the right-hand side. And then we've got the dev tools opened up at the bottom so we can see the output of the JavaScript code. So there are several different ways to create arrays in JavaScript, and these are all going to be equivalent. So first off, let's go ahead and we're going to create our first array. So just use arr1. And typically you can create arrays just using the square brackets. And if you want to add in content by default into there, so this can just be different data types that you can add in. So I'm just adding in the values of 1, 2, and 3. So you can also create an array using the keyword new. So this is going to be initiating and constructing a brand new array. So we use the new array structure, and this is using the rounded brackets, and then the elements as well can get comma separated and added in there. And then the third way to create an array, and this way as well, it's using the array keyword, and you don't have to use the word new, as JavaScript will understand that this is an array that you're trying to create. So let's log out all of these new arrays that we've just created, and we'll see that there is no difference between them, that they're all different and valid ways to create an array using JavaScript code. So there's all of our outputs there. Arrays also come with a length property value, so you can find out how many items are in the array using the length. So that would be that you list out the array and then using the length. And when you open up the arrays within the console, you can see that it does hold the property there of length. So that tells us how many items are currently within the array. So this has been a quick example of how you can create arrays using JavaScript. So go ahead and try it out. You can also use a numeric value in order to create a number of items within the array. So creating another array, so doing an array and then using a value in here, and this can just be any numeric value. And what that will do is it will create an array with a certain length. And these are going to be just blank values within the array. So you can see when it lists it out, it's just going to list it out as empty, although the length is going to be 20 because there's actually 20 items in the array. So even though that they're blank, they're still going to be created that way. You can also create an array using an array length. So you can set the length of the array, where when we create the array already, and instead of getting the length, we can select the value of the array and then set a value for length. So if we set this value for length of 20 for the array 1, that's going to give us 20 items, and the rest of the ones are going to be blank. If you create an array and just list it out as a value in here, so if we do the value of 20, that's just going to create an array with just the one item and the one length value, which is going to be equal to the item within the array of 20. So this is not going to create an array with 20 items. It's going to create an array that has a value with just the one value in there. Also, in order to get the array length, so you can use either the bracket notation or the dot notation. So this is another way that you can return back the length using the bracket notation. So now we've got the array length at 20, so you can use the bracket notation. You can also return back items that are contained within the array, so selecting it by its index value. So whatever the value is, if we want to get the last item of the array, we can take the length and we can subtract 1. And the reason that we're subtracting 1 is that this is returning back the array and it's subtracting 1 off of it. So let's update this because those are empty items there. So we want to return back the value of 3, which is the last item within array 2. And arrays are 0 based. That's why we've got the value that we're able to use, the length value minus 1. So minus 1 is going to be referring to the last item, because as we see within this array, the length is going to be 3 because we've got 3 items in there, but the first item is going to have a value of index 0, then 2 is going to have a value of 1, and 3 is going to have a value of 2. So if we want to return back those values, we would indicate it by its index value, and then the last one will have an index value of 2. We have a length of 3 minus 1 is going to be the equivalent of 2. So there's our output of the value of the third item that's contained within the array. If you want to loop through the items contained within the array, so let's do that, and you can use a simple for loop where you're looping through the value of the items in the array, so subtracting and whatever the array length is. So let's use the value of 1. So this is an example of where you can use the array length in order to output some of the content that's contained within the array. And we're just going to be returning back the array item using its index value. And we see that we've got the 17 of them are undefined because once again we did create the array and we set a new length for the array. When we set a new length, they come back undefined there because there's no value that's already been set to it. Another way to loop through is using the forEach. So this is going to be a more streamlined approach, as you can reference the values, assigning it to a variable as you go through. And this case, we don't get the undefined because we're only getting a value for the actual items that are in the array that have values. So if they don't have values, then they're not being output. So this is a more efficient way. If you do have blank values and items within the array, you're going to find that it is updating and setting it this way. Also, let's add in a new value into the array. So we can select the value and we can set a property there. So for array 1, it's going to be test, and that should be array 1. The item with the index of 1 is going to have a value of test. If we set an item with an index value of 100 that doesn't exist, what happened is that now the array is going to have 100 items in there, and they're all going to be blank. So that's where we're getting the undefined, 97 undefined. But when we use the forEach, we get still all of the values that have values, all the items that do have values that are being output into the console.